The moment I heard my fiancé tell his wealthy friends that I was a total gold digger, I did not cry or run away, I just smiled. They thought I was desperate for his money, unaware that we were standing on property I secretly owned. While he bragged about saving 50 grand on a prenup, I was deciding how to crush his entire career with a single signature. The wedding was off, but the show was just beginning. My name is Aleer Phillips. I am 29 years old, and if you looked at my bank statement today, you would see a transaction for $1.04 latte from a generic coffee shop and a pending charge for my share of the electric bill. I live in a second-floor walk-up in Ravenswood Heights, a neighborhood that real estate agents generously call up and coming, but everyone else just calls far. My apartment smells faintly of lavender detergent and the Thai place downstairs. The furniture is a mix of assemble-yourself pieces and thrift store finds that I sanded down on weekends to make them look vintage rather than just old to the world, and specifically to the man I am about to marry. I am a freelance brand strategist for a boutique agency called Nova Forge Studio. It sounds impressive until you realize the studio is just 3 people sharing a Y-workspace downtown. I drive a sedan with 112,000 m on the odometer. I complain about student loans. I use coupons at the grocery store. I am the picture-perfect image of the struggling modern American woman trying to carve out a life in a city that charges you for breathing, and Dylan Mercer loves it. Dylan is my fiancé. He is 31, handsome in that effortless, well-fed way that comes from never having skipped a meal due to a lack of funds. He comes from the Mercer family, the East Coast Mercers, the kind of lineage where middle names are surnames and summer is used as a verb. His grandfather, Franklin Mercer, co-founded Mercer and Hale Capital 50 years ago, building an empire that turned the family name into a synonym for aggressive wealth accumulation. I am currently staring at my calendar, counting down the days to the wedding. It is supposed to be the happiest time of my life. Everyone keeps telling me that. But as I pack my overnight bag for yet another pre-wedding dinner, I do not feel happy. I feel watchful. The narrative of our relationship is simple, at least the version Dylan tells his friends. I am the grounded, humble girl who keeps him real. He is the knight in shining armor who swept me off my feet, rescuing me from a life of budgeting apps and frozen dinners. It is a story that feeds his ego. He loves the way I look at the menu prices before ordering. He loves the way I hesitate before buying a dress that costs more than $80. It makes him feel like a provider. It makes him feel powerful. But there is a different narrative running beneath the surface, one written by his mother, Veronica Mercer. Veronica is a woman who can estimate the thread count of your blouse from across a crowded room. She does not look at people. She appraises them. The first time Dylan introduced us, she did not ask me about my childhood or my dreams. She asked me where I summered when I told her I usually just visited my aunt in Ohio. Her smile didn't falter, but the temperature in the room dropped 10. To her, I am not a person. I am an investment risk. I am a liability. I remember the proposal vividly. It happened 6 months ago at a rooftop bar in Manhattan, the kind of place where a cocktail costs $25 and tastes like arrogance. Dylan had rented out the entire VIP section. He got down on one knee in front of 50 of our closest friends. Well, mostly his friends, and presented me with a ring that probably cost more than my father made in 3 years. It was perfect. It was cinematic. It was exactly what Instagram wanted. But as Dylan slipped the diamond onto my finger and the crowd cheered, I caught Veronica's eye. She was standing near the champagne tower holding a crystal flute. She wasn't looking at my face. She was looking at the ring on my hand, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she were calculating the insurance premium or wondering if the setting was secure enough for a girl who takes public transit. It wasn't just Veronica. It was his friends, too. Landon Pierce, Chase Holloway, Mateo Ross. They are the kind of men who wear loafers without socks and talk about closing deals while chewing with their mouths open. They have accepted me into the fold, but always with a wink, always with a nudge. You got a good one. Dylan, Landon had said just last week at a brunch that cost more than my monthly rent. He clapped Dylan on the back, his voice booming. Find a girl who knows the value of $1, right? She will keep your accounts in check, or she will spend it all once the ink is dry," Chase had added, laughing as if it were just a harmless joke. "Better lock that down, buddy. Prenups are the new romance." They all laughed. Dillon laughed too. I just smiled. I have perfected that smile over the last 2 years. It is a soft, non-threatening curve of the lips that says, "I am just happy to be here. I do not understand your complex financial jokes. I am just a girl in love." They think I am naive. They think I am overwhelmed by their world of black cards and private clubs. They think I am reaching up, straining on my tiptoes to grab a piece of their golden ladder. They have no idea. I finished packing my bag and walked over to the closet in my bedroom. Behind a rack of modest coats, Zara HM, a few thrifted trench coats, there is a loose panel in the drywall. I pushed it aside, revealing a small, heavy safe embedded in the studs. I did not open it. I haven't opened it in over a year, but I know exactly what is inside. There is a steel lockbox containing a stack of documents that would make Veronica Mercer choke on her vintage Chardonnay. There are deeds. There are stock certificates. There are trust fund statements with numbers that have so many zeros they look like binary code. Most of the assets are held in complex structures layered under innocuous-sounding LLCs and trusts, but the beneficiary name is always the same: Lear Phillips. I reached out and touched the cold metal of the safe door. My mother always told me that money is loud, but wealth is quiet. She taught me that the moment you flash what you have, you become a target. You become a commodity. Don't ever let a man know what you are worth. She had whispered to me from her hospital bed, her grip surprisingly strong on my hand. Not until you know who he is when he thinks you are nothing. So I became nothing. Or rather, I became ordinary. I drove the Toyota. I clipped the coupons. I let Dillon pay for dinner and listened to him explain the stock market to me like I was a child, nodding witty while correcting his analysis in my head. It has been an exhausting performance. Sometimes the disparity in how they treat me grates on my nerves like sandpaper. It is in the little things. It is the way they order for me at restaurants because they assume I don't know the difference between a Pinot Noir and a Merlot. It is the way they talk about their vacations in St. Bart's and then turned to me with pitying smiles to ask if I managed to get time off from my little design gigs. I walked away from the closet and slid the panel back into place. The secret remained safe, breathing quietly in the dark. Tonight is the dinner at the Harborview district. It is supposed to be a casual gathering with Dillon's inner circle before the formal rehearsal dinner tomorrow. I walked to the full mirror leaning against the wall. The glass is slightly warped at the bottom, making my feet look tiny. I am wearing a simple slip dress I bought on sale. It is elegant but understated. It says I tried, but it doesn't say I belong. That is the sweet spot. That is the costume. I looked at my reflection. My eyes looked tired. For a fleeting second, I wondered why I was still doing this. Why was I marrying a man who needed to feel superior to me, to feel love? Why was I entering a family that viewed me as a parasite? Maybe part of me hoped I was wrong. Maybe I hoped that beneath the bravado and the wealth, Dillon really did love me, not for the ego boost I provided. Maybe I hoped that once we were married, the testing would stop. But as I smoothed the fabric over my hips, a cold shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't the drafty apartment. It was a premonition. The air felt heavy, charged with static, like the sky turns a peculiar shade of green right before a tornado touches down. I grabbed my purse, checking to make sure I'd had my wallet with its maxed-out credit card and my old iPhone with the cracked screen protector. I took a deep breath, fixing the mask back onto my face. "Showtime, Leah," I whispered to the empty room. I had no idea that tonight the curtain was going to fall and the script was going to burn. I had no idea that the gold digger they mocked was about to become the only thing standing between them and total ruin. But for now, I just locked the door to my cheap apartment and headed downstairs to wait for the yuba I could barely afford. The venue was a private lounge tucked away on the top floor of the Hotel Grand View in the Harborview district. It was the kind of place that did not put prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you were already in the wrong room. The lighting was low in amber, designed to make diamonds sparkle and wrinkles vanish. The air smelled of aged leather, cigar smoke, and that specific crisp scent of money being spent without consequence. "This is one of our favorite spots," Dillon said as he guided me into the room, his hand firm on the small of my back. He emphasized the word "our" when looking at his friends, but his tone created a subtle, invisible border that kept me on the outside. He meant it was a favorite spot for him and the boys. I was just a guest with a temporary pass. We sat in a semicircle on plush velvet sofas. I was squeezed between Dillon and a man named Chase, whose cologne was aggressive enough to water my eyes. The table in front of us was littered with crystal tumblers and bottles of whiskey that cost more than my car insurance for the entire year. For the first 40 minutes I sat in silence, wearing my practiced smile. The conversation flowed over my head like a dark river filled with terms that were meant to exclude me. They talked about seven-figure deals as if they were discussing grocery lists. They laughed about a friend who crashed his yacht in the Mediterranean and simply bought another one the next day to avoid ruining the vacation. They discussed tax loopholes with the casual ease of people trading cookie recipes. "You have to route it through the Caymans before the fiscal year ends," Landon said, swirling his ice. My accountant found a way to classify the jet as a necessary business expense for agricultural research. It saved me $200,000. "Genius," Dillon said, raising his glass. "I need to get his number. I am tired of giving Uncle Sam a cut of the commission." I took a small sip of my water. In my head, I was correcting Landon's understanding of Tax Code Section 162, knowing that his agricultural research claim would trigger an immediate audit if the IRS ever looked twice. But externally, I just widened my eyes and looked impressed. Veronica Mercer sat across from us, looking like a queen holding court. She was wearing a silk blouse that shimmered under the lights. She did not drink alcohol. She sipped sparkling water with a slice of lime, her eyes darting around the room, assessing the status of everyone present. "Dillon has always had such an eye for value," Veronica said suddenly, her voice cutting through the male laughter. She looked at her son, then let her gaze slide over to me. It was a physical sensation, like a scanner reading a barcode. "He always knows when to buy low and sell high. He chooses the right opportunities and the right people." The table went quiet for a second. It was a compliment to Dillon, but to me it felt like she was praising him for picking up a bargain item at a clearance sale. I was the bargain. "Thanks, Mom," Dillon said, squeezing my knee. "I know a good thing when I see it." I smiled, dropping my gaze to the floor. "I am just lucky he chose me," I said softly. It was the line they expected. It was the line that made them comfortable. "We are all lucky," Chase laughed, though his eyes remained cold. "But luck is just preparation meeting opportunity right." The air in the room was stifling. I stood up, murmuring an excuse about needing the ladies' room. I needed 5 minutes to breathe, to reset the mask that was starting to slip. The restroom was down a long corridor lined with abstract art that looked like angry splashes of paint. As I approached the door, I heard voices coming from the powder room area. The heavy mahogany door was slightly ajar. "Oh, she is sweet," a female voice said. I recognized it as Ashley, Landon's wife. "But come on, it is painful to watch. She stares at the menu like she is calculating the exchange rate." "Dillon loves it," another voice replied. "He told me it makes him feel like a king. He said, just let her think I will handle everything. Women like that are easy to control because they are terrified of losing the life-so. It is actually kind of smart." I froze, my hand hovering over the brass handle, my heart hammered against my ribs. Women like that. I did not go in. I could not face them in the mirror right now. I turned around, my heels silent on the thick carpet, intending to go back to the lounge and tell Dillon I had a headache. I wanted to go home. I wanted to crawl into my cheap bed and sleep. But as I neared the private lounge, I realized Dillon had moved. He was no longer on the sofa. He was standing in the small vestibule connecting the lounge to the smoking terrace, out of sight from the main room, but audible from the hallway where I stood in the shadows. The door to the terrace was open. Smoke drifted out along with the sound of male laughter. "Come on, man. Be honest." Landon's voice was slurred, heavy with whiskey. "She is not exactly one of us. Is it just the looks?" I pressed myself against the wall. I should have walked away. I should have covered my ears, but I stood there, rooted to the spot by a morbid, paralyzed curiosity. "She is a total gold digger, bro." Dylan's voice rang out. It was loud, confident, and dripping with amusement. My breath hitched in my throat. "But it is fine," Dylan continued. "I keep her around. She looks good on my arm. She doesn't ask questions about where I go on Thursday nights, and she loves the idea of my money. You should see her eyes light up when I pay for dinner. It is pathetic, but it makes me feel good." The group erupted into laughter. It was a guttural, ugly sound. "You are playing with fire," Chase warned, though he was laughing too. "Gold diggers have sharp shovels. Mercer, not this one," Dylan scoffed. "I am 10 steps ahead. I already have the lawyers draft the prenup. It is ironclad. If we divorce, she gets 0. Actually, less than 0. There is a clause about shared liability for marital debts. But since I keep the assets in a separate trust, she would technically end up owing money if she tried to leave. I am safe. Even if she walks, my portfolio stays clean." "Does she know?" Landon asked. "Of course not," Dylan bragged. "She doesn't understand the law. I told her it is standard procedure to protect our future children." She nodded like a bobblehead. "God, she is so desperate to be a Mercer. She would sign a death warrant if I put a diamond on top of it." "To the prenup," someone shouted. "To the clown," Dylan toasted. Clink. I stood there in the hallway, the vibration of their toast humming in the air. I felt stripped naked. Every kind smile, every "I love you," every moment of intimacy over the last 2 years dissolved into acid. He wasn't just accusing me. He was mocking me. He was building a trap and laughing while I walked into it. A normal person would have cried. A normal person would have stormed in there, thrown a drink in his face, and screamed. But I did not cry. My eyes were dry as desert sand. Something inside my chest, something soft and hopeful that I had been nurturing for him, curled up and died. And in its place, something else woke up. It was a cold, heavy feeling, like the tumblers falling into place in a steel lock. They thought I was a clown. They thought I was a beggar at their feast. I straightened my spine. I smoothed the front of my dress. I reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. I took a deep breath and I walked back into the room. When I entered, Dylan was just coming back from the terrace, smelling of smoke and deceit. He saw me and flashed that charming practice smile, the same smile he had just used while calling me a gold digger. "Hey, babe," he said, reaching for my waist. "Everything okay? You were gone a while." "I am fine," I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. It was melodic and sweet. "Just needed to freshen up. You know I always want to look my best for you." I walked past him to the table where Veronica was sitting. Her glass was empty. "Let me get that for you, Mrs. Mercer," I said, picking up the bottle of Pan Noir. "Thank you, Aaliyah," she said, not looking up from her phone. I poured the wine, watching the dark red liquid swirl into the glass. My hand was perfectly steady. I looked around the room at the faces of the men who had just laughed at my expense, at the women who pied my poverty. Enjoy it, I thought. Enjoy this version of me. It is the last time you will ever see her. I sat through the rest of the night. I laughed at their jokes. I nodded at their stories. I played the part of the grateful, simple-minded fiancé so perfectly that I deserved an Academy Award. When Dylan dropped me off at my apartment later that night, he tried to kiss me. I turned my head so his lips landed on my cheek. "Tired?" he asked. "Exhausted," I said. "Big day tomorrow." "Get some rest," he said, patting my arm. "Don't worry about the bill for the dress. I will take care of it." "You are so generous, Dylan." I said good night. I waited until his tail lights disappeared around the corner. Then I walked up the 2 flights of stairs to my apartment. I did not turn on the main lights. I walked through the darkness to my bedroom closet. I pushed aside the rack of coats and slid the panel open for the first time in a year. I spun the dial on the safe, left to 32, right to 15, left to 8. Click. The heavy door swung open. I reached inside and pulled out the metal box. I carried it to the small kitchen table and sat down. I opened the latch. Inside lay the truth. I picked up the first document. It was a deed for a commercial property in downtown Manhattan. The tenant was a major bank. The owner of record was a shell company fully owned by the Phillips Trust. I picked up the next document, a stock portfolio summary. The total value at the bottom of the page had 8 figures before the decimal point. I picked up the third document. It was the shareholder breakdown for a massive land development project in the suburbs. The same project Dylan had been bragging about trying to buy into all night. He didn't know that the land he wanted to build on was already mine. I spread the papers out on the cheap laminate table in the dim light of the street lamps filtering through the window. My name, Alear Phillips, stared back at me from every page. Bold, undeniable, powerful. Dylan thought he was the shark. He thought I was the bait. I picked up a pen and pulled a notepad toward me. I did not write a diary entry. I did not write a letter to him. I wrote a list. Item 1, call Mason Calloway. Item 2, locate Franklin Mercer. Item 3, prepare the stage. I looked at the papers one last time before closing the box. A small, cold smile touched my lips, the first genuine smile I had worn all night. You want a gold digger, Dylan? I whispered into the silence of my apartment. Fine. I will show you exactly who owns the mine. The documents spread out on my cheap laminate kitchen table were not just paper. They were ghosts. They were echoes of a life I had buried so deep I had almost forgotten it existed myself. As I ran my fingers over the embossed seal of the Sycamore Trust, the smell of my current apartment's stale coffee and floor cleaner faded away, replaced by the scent of pine trees and soldering iron smoke. I did not grow up in Ravenswood Heights. I grew up in a quiet, nondescript town 3 hours north in a house that was comfortable but hardly a mansion. My father was not a titan of industry like Franklin Mercer. He was a man who wore flannel shirts with ink stains on the pocket and forgot to eat lunch because he was too busy coding. He was the founder of Phillips Quantum Labs. When I was 12 years old, my father sold his startup to a global conglomerate. I remember the day it happened. He came home, sat me and my mother down at our oak dining table, and told us that we were now very wealthy. He did not buy a yacht. He did not buy a sports car. He put the money, $150 million after taxes, into a series of secure investments and told us nothing would change except that we would never have to worry about the heat being turned off again. Aaliyah, he had told me, his eyes serious behind his wire-rimmed glasses. Money does not change people. That is a lie. Money is a magnifying glass. If you're a kind person, money lets you be kinder. If you're a greedy person, money makes you a monster. It just shows the world who you really are. He died 4 years later, a massive heart attack while he was jogging. Just like that, the brilliant mind behind the code was gone, leaving behind a silence that no amount of money could fill. That was when Mason Calloway entered our lives. He was my father's oldest friend and personal attorney. He was the one who structured the Sycamore Trust. He built it like a fortress. The assets were buried under layers of holding companies and blind trusts. If anyone searched for Alear Phillips, they would find a girl with a modest credit score and a used car. They would never find the eyes to a 9-figure fortune. My mother lasted 3 years without him. The cancer took her slowly, stripping away her strength, but never her wisdom. I remember sitting by her hospital bed 2 days before she passed. The machines were beeping in a rhythmic, terrifying cadence. She pulled my hand close, her grip weak, but her eyes fierce. Listen to me, she had whispered, her voice raspy. You have a heart like your father's. You want to trust, but the world is full of wolves, Alear, especially for a woman with a fortune. She took a breath that rattled in her chest. Don't ever let a man know what you are worth. Not until you know exactly who he is when he thinks you are nothing. If he loves you when you are poor, he deserves you when you are rich, but never before. I promised her, but I was 22, young and grieving, and I made a mistake. His name was Julian. He was charming, a struggling artist who painted abstract landscapes. I didn't tell him everything, but I let slip that I had a small inheritance. I let him use my credit cards. I funded his gallery opening. I thought we were partners. 6 months later, I came home to find my apartment empty and my bank account drained of the $50,000 I had kept in check. He had left a note saying he needed to find himself in Europe. That betrayal hardened me. It turned my mother's advice into a law. I moved to Ravenswood Heights. I took the freelance job at Nova Forge Studio. I bought the used sedan. I built a life that was small, manageable, and entirely mine. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the Sycamore Trust. Then I met Dylan. When we first started dating, Dylan seemed so different from the men in his circle. He drove a flashy car, yes, but he took me to hole-in-the-wall diners. He told me he admired my work ethic. "You are so real, Aaliyah," he had told me on our third date, looking at me with what I thought was adoration. "You have no idea how refreshing it is. Most of the girls I meet are just looking for a payout. They are looking for a shortcut. You are building something." I remember feeling a surge of guilt then. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to say I am not struggling. I could buy this restaurant and the block it sits on. But every time I got close to telling him, he would make a comment. He would sneer at a woman on TV for marrying a billionaire. He would joke with his friends about protecting the principal. He would talk about how his mother, Veronica, had to fend off leeches since his father died. So I waited. I told myself I was just being cautious. I told myself I needed a little more time. Sitting in my dark kitchen now with the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, the irony tasted bitter on my tongue. Dylan liked my poverty because it made him feel superior. He didn't admire my independence. He admired the fact that I was cheap to maintain. He liked that I was a discount accessory. The conversation I had overheard in the hotel corridor replayed in my mind. "She is a total gold digger." He was so proud of his prenup. He was so proud of his trap. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, not from fear, but from a sudden clarifying rage. For 2 years, I had dimmed my light to make him feel brighter. I had made myself small so he could feel big. And his response was to laugh at me with his friends and plan my financial ruin. I was done hiding. I reached for my phone. It was 3:00 in the morning, but I knew Mason Calloway would be awake. He slept 4 hours a night and spent the rest of the time reading case law. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Aaliyah." His voice was growly, instantly alert. "Is everything all right? It is very late. I need you to wake up." "Mason," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, cold, precise, devoid of the softness I usually carried. "We have work to do." "Has something happened?" "Everything has happened," I replied. "I need a full audit of the Sycamore Trust. I need to know exactly what we have in liquid assets, what we have in real estate, and what our leverage points are. Specifically, I need to know everything we have that intersects with the Mercer family." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mason was too professional to ask about my personal life, but he was smart enough to connect the dots. "The wedding is in 3 days," Mason noted cautiously. "There is not going to be a wedding," I said. "There is going to be a funeral. We are burying a reputation." I heard the rustle of papers on the other end. Mason was already moving. "I have the portfolio summary right here on my secure server. You know, the trust is diversified. Tech, green energy, real estate. I don't care about the general portfolio." I cut in. "I want the deep history. I want the things my father invested in before he died." I remember him talking about supporting young financial firms. He believed in ethical capitalism. "Yes," Mason said slowly. "He did. He had a philanthropic arm called the Lantern Foundation. It is a subsidiary of your trust. It does mostly seed funding for startups." "Did the Lantern Foundation ever invest in a firm called Mercer and Hale?" I asked. It was a shot in the dark, a hunch born from a memory of a holiday card I had seen in my father's office 15 years ago, with the name Franklin Mercer on it. The silence on the line stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard. "That is going back a long way," Mason muttered. "Let me pull the archived ledgers from 20 years ago. Mercer and Hale was just a boutique firm then. Franklin was looking for capital to expand into the tech sector." I waited, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Here it is," Mason said, his voice dropping an octave. "My God, what is it?" "The Lantern Foundation provided the initial seed capital for Mercer and Hale's second fund. It was a convertible note," Mason explained, his lawyer brain kicking into high gear. "It was never paid back in cash." Instead, it converted into preferred equity because it was a charitable investment. The dividends were reinvested automatically for the last 2 decades. What does that mean in English, Mason? I asked, gripping the phone. It means, Mason said, and I could practically hear him smiling for the first time in years, that through the Lanton Foundation, you are not just an investor. You are one of the original limited partners. And because of the special ethical conduct clauses your father insisted on putting in all his contracts, you have voting rights. I sat back in my chair, the air rushing out of my lungs. Voting rights, I repeated. Significant ones, Mason confirmed. If the firm violates the ethical standards set forth in the original agreement, standards about integrity, honesty, and fiduciary duty, the foundation can call for a review of the leadership. Theoretically, you could freeze their liquidity. A chill ran down my spine, but it was a good chill. It was the feeling of a weapon being placed in my hand. Diller thought he controlled the world because his last name was on the building. He didn't realize that my father's money was the concrete in the foundation. Mason, I said softly, I want you to prepare a file. I want every breach of contract, every questionable deal they have done, and proof of my ownership, and I want you to find a way to get me a meeting with Franklin Mercer without Veronica or Dylan knowing. Franklin, Mason asked. He is retired. He is practically a recluse. He is the only one in that house who might have a conscience, I said, and I have a feeling he hates being managed by his daughter-in-law as much as I hate being lied to by his grandson. I will set it up, Mason promised. Leah, are you sure you want to do this? Once you pull this thread, the whole sweater unravels. I looked at the engagement ring sitting on the table where I had taken it off. It sparkled under the kitchen light, cold and hard. They called me a bold digger. Mason, I said, I am just going to show them whose shovel they are standing on. I will have the papers ready by tomorrow, Mason said. I hung up the phone. The darkness of the apartment didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like a war room. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline, where the Mercer building towered over the financial district. You wanted a show, Dylan, I whispered to the glass. I am going to give you a masterpiece. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon right in the middle of a Zoom meeting I was pretending to pay attention to. The caller ID flashed Veronica Mercer. I let it ring twice before picking up, composing my voice into the bright, helpful tone she expected from her son's low-ras fiancé. Leah, darling, she said, bypassing a greeting entirely. I have a tiny favor to ask. Dylan and I have been invited to an exclusive investor retreat in the Hamptons. It is a 4-day event, very high on networking. We leave Friday morning. That sounds wonderful, Veronica. I said, it is critical for the family business, she continued, her voice clipping along like she was reading a manifesto. The problem is the weekend nurse for Franklin just quit. Something about family emergencies. People these days have no work ethic. Anyway, we cannot leave him alone at the estate. I knew exactly where this was going. You want me to watch him? I asked. Well, you are practically family, she said, the sweetness in her voice barely coating the condescension underneath. And let's be honest, dear, it is not like you have any major clients demanding your time on a weekend, do you? Your little design projects can wait. It was a masterful insult. In 2 sentences, she had dismissed my career and established my value solely as unpaid domestic labor. A week ago, I would have felt the sting of shame. Today, I just felt the cold calculation of opportunity. Of course, I said, my voice smooth. I would love to spend time with Grandpa Franklin. I will head up to Maplerist on Friday. Perfect, she said. The staff will leave dinner in the fridge. Just make sure he takes his pills and doesn't wander off. He gets confused. She hung up without saying goodbye. I immediately called Mason. Go, Mason said, his voice crackling over the speakerphone. But keep your eyes open, Leah. That house is not just a home. It is a vault. And I have a suspicion that Dylan is not the only one in that family living on borrowed time and other people's money. If you can get Franklin to talk, do it. On Friday afternoon, I drove my beat-up sedan up the winding driveway of Maplerist. The estate was breathtaking in the way only old American money can be. It was a sprawling Georgian manor built of red brick and white stone, surrounded by manicured hedges that looked like they were trimmed with nail scissors. It projected power, stability, and tradition. But as soon as I unlocked the heavy front door and stepped inside, the illusion shattered. The air inside was stale, smelling of lemon polish and old dust. It was quiet, not the peaceful quiet of a library, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a place where no one laughs. The furniture in the grand foyer was covered in dust sheets, ghostly shapes in the dim light. It felt less like a home and more like a museum that had lost its funding. Hello, I called out. Silence answered me. I walked through the main hall, past the oil paintings of long-deaded mercers who looked down at me with disapproving eyes. I found the kitchen, which was gleaming and modern, clearly renovated for show, but the refrigerator was depressing. Inside, I found 3 plastic containers of what looked like generic soup and a stack of frozen dinners. This was what they fed the founder of their dynasty. I made my way to the east wing, where Veronica had told me Franklin's quarters were. The hallway here was narrower, the carpet worn thin in the middle. The heating seemed to struggle this far from the main furnace. The air had a distinct chill to it. I found Franklin Mercer in a sunroom at the end of the hall. He was sitting in a high-backed leather armchair that looked like it might swallow him whole. At 82 years old, Franklin was a shadow of the titan I had read about in business school case studies. His frame was skeletal, his skin like crumpled parchment paper. He was wrapped in a thick wool blanket, staring out the window at the gray sky. He didn't move when I entered. "Mr. Mercer," I said softly. "It is Lear, Dillon's fiancé." He turned his head slowly. His eyes were startlingly blue, piercing through the haze of age. They were not the eyes of a confused man. They were sharp, assessing, and brimming with a cynical intelligence. He looked me up and down, taking in my simple jeans and sweater. So he rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves scraping together. "The certified gold digger has finally arrived." I froze. My hand gripped the strap of my bag. It felt like a slap in the face. Even here, even with this neglected old man, the label followed me. "Excuse me," I said, my voice tight. Franklin let out a dry wheezing sound that might have been a laugh. He gestured with a trembling hand toward the empty chair opposite him. "Sit down, girl," he said. "Don't look so shocked. I am old, not deaf. I heard them in the kitchen last week. Veronica was complaining that you were going to bleed Dillon dry, and Dillon was bragging that he was going to make you sign a prenup that would leave you with nothing but the cab fare home." I stood there, stunned. He knew. "They think because I sit in this chair and stare at the birds, I have lost my mind." Franklin continued, turning back to the window. "People talk freely around the furniture, and that is what I am to them now. An expensive piece of furniture they cannot wait to send to the dump." I slowly lowered myself into the chair. The anger I had felt a moment ago evaporated, replaced by a strange, hollow ache. "They told me you get confused," I said quietly. "That is what they tell everyone," Franklin replied bitterly. "It makes it easier to explain why I am never at the board meetings anymore. It makes it easier to justify why they moved me to this drafty wing of the house." While Veronica turned my study into her yoga studio, he pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. "I am not confused, Aaliyah. I am just inconvenient." I looked around the room. There were no family photos here, no fresh flowers, just a stack of newspapers and a glass of water that looked like it had been sitting there since yesterday. "They left you frozen dinners," I said. "Of course they did," he scoffed. "Veronica says the chef is too expensive to keep on weekends. She spends $5,000 on a handbag, but won't pay $200 for someone to cook her father-in-law a hot meal. That is the Mercer way." Now all flash, no foundation. I felt a sudden surge of empathy for this man. We were both props in Veronica and Dillon's theater. I was the naive trophy. He was the legacy prop. "Why do you stay?" I asked. "You founded the company. You must have resources." Franklin looked at me, his expression darkening. "Power is a tricky thing, Burl. You give a little away to your son because you trust him. Then he dies, and his wife takes a little more. Then your grandson takes the rest for your own good. Before you know it, you're signing papers you can barely read because they hid your glasses, and you're trapped in your own house." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But I have not been idle. I watch, I listen, and I read the mail before Veronica hides it. What have you seen? I asked. They are leveraging me, Franklin said, his eyes flashing with anger. They are using my name, my personal credit, to secure loans for these high-risk venture bets Dylan is so fond of. They think I don't know. They forge my signature on the routine stuff. But for the big loans, they need me, so they bring me the papers on days when I'm tired, telling me it is just insurance updates or medical forms. He paused, coughing into a handkerchief. They are digging a hole, Aaliyah, a deep one, and they are using my shovel to do it. I leaned back, my mind racing. This matched what Mason had suspected. They weren't just mean. They were reckless. They were criminals. They called me a gold digger, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Dylan told his friends at a party that I was a total gold digger, but it was fine because I looked good on his arm. Franklin looked at me for a moment. The hardness in his face softened. He saw the hurt I was trying to hide. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound, but it was genuine. Gold digger, he wheezed, wiping his eyes. Oh, that is rich. That is truly rich. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with irony. They think you are the one digging for gold, my dear. They are the ones standing in a graveyard, digging the tomb for their own careers. They are the parasites. They produce nothing. They create nothing. They just consume what I built. He reached out a shaking hand and tapped my knee. Let me ask you something. You have a look about you. Not the look of a girl who is hungry for money, but the look of a girl who knows exactly what things cost. Or are you really? I hesitated. I had promised my mother. I had kept this secret for years. But looking at this old man, betrayed by his own blood, I felt the kinship I hadn't expected. My father was David Phillips, I said softly. Franklin's eyebrows shot up. David Phillips' Quantum Lads. I nodded. I knew him, Franklin said, a tone of reverence entering his voice. Brilliant man, honorable man. We did business together back when a handshake meant something. He stared at me, the pieces clicking into place in his sharp mind. So, he whispered, you are not looking for a payout. You are the payout. I have enough to buy this house 3 times over, I said, my voice steady. And I have the voting rights from the original seed investment your firm took from my father's foundation. Franklin stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, wicked smile spread across his face. It transformed him. He didn't look like a victim anymore. He looked like the wolf who had built an empire. Well then, Franklin said, sitting up straighter than he had in years. It seems we have a common enemy, and it seems we have an opportunity. He pointed to a dusty cabinet in the corner of the room. Open that bottom drawer, the locked one. The key is taped under the seat of this chair. I found the key and unlocked the drawer. Inside was a thick file folder crammed with photocopies, handwritten notes, and bank statements. I may be old, Franklin said, his voice gaining strength, but I know where the bodies are buried because I am the one who refused to dig the holes. That file contains records of every unauthorized transfer, every forged signature, and every reckless loan they have taken out in my name over the last 5 years. I have been compiling it, waiting for someone I could trust. He looked at me, his blue eyes blazing. If you want to show them who really needs the money, Aaliyah, bring that file here. We are going to go through it. I don't have many years left, and my legs might not work like they used to. But I have enough time left to pull the rug out from under those arrogant clowns. We are going to make a hit they will remember for the rest of their miserable, bankrupt lives. I took the file in my hands. It was heavy. It felt like justice. Are you hungry, Franklin? I asked, looking at the frozen dinners with disgust. Starving, he admitted. I haven't had a decent meal in weeks. Good, I said, standing up. I am going to the grocery store. I am going to buy real food. And then we are going to cook dinner, drink the good wine I know they are hiding in the cellar, and we are going to plan a wedding present that Dylan will never forget. Franklin Mercer grinned, and for the first time the house didn't feel cold anymore. I like you, kid, he said. Now go get the wine, the expensive stuff. Let's spend some of their inheritance. The room smelled of lemongrass and hypocrisy. We were in what used to be Franklin's private study, a mahogany-lined sanctuary where he had built an empire. Now Veronica had transformed it into her wellness space. There were yoga mats rolled up in the corner, a stack of singing bowls that I doubted she knew how to use, and a giant abstract painting that looked like a bruise on the wall. "Push that mirror," Franklin instructed, pointing his cane at a full glass panel mounted on the east wall, the one with the bold frame. "Push the right edge." I did as he asked. The heavy frame clicked and swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing a wall safe and a series of deep, recessed file cabinets that had been plastered over to look like part of the wall. Veronica had renovated the room, but she had been too lazy to tear out the bones of the house. She had just decorated them. "She thinks this is just a structural column," Franklin muttered, leaning heavily on his cane as he hobbled over. "She never checks the blueprints. Arrogance makes people sloppy." He spun the dial on the safe. The combination was ingrained in his muscle memory, his trembling fingers suddenly steady as they executed the sequence. With a heavy thud, the door swung open. It was not filled with gold bars or cash. It was filled with paper, stacks and stacks of it, organized with the obsessive precision of a man who knew that the devil was in the details. "Get them out," he said. "Put them on the floor. The yoga mats finally have a use." I sat cross-legged on the floor, spreading the documents out in a fan. It was a forensic autopsy of the Mercer family legacy. The first document I picked up made my breath catch in my throat. It was a photocopy of the original seed funding agreement between the Lanton Foundation, my father's charitable arm, and Mercer and Hale Capital. I ran my finger down the lines of text. There it was. Clause 14, Section B. In the event of a breach of fiduciary duty, unethical business practices, or criminal negligence by the managing partners, the class of preferred shareholders, the Lanton Foundation retained the right to trigger an immediate vote of no confidence and assume temporary executive control to protect the asset. "My father wrote this," I whispered. "David was a stickler for ethics," Franklin said, lowering himself onto a meditation cushion with a grunt. "He told me, 'I am giving you this money because I trust you. But if you ever let the sharks take over, I want the power to stop them.' I signed it because I never intended to be a shark. I didn't know I was raising one." He handed me another sheet of paper. This one was an email printout. It was dated 6 months ago from Veronica to Dylan. Subject: liquidity issues. Maple leverage. I read the body of the email, and a chill went through me that had nothing to do with the drafty house. "Dylan, the bank is stalling on the mezzanine loan for the Seaport project. They are worried about the debt-to-equity ratio. I told them Franklin is still the guarantor as long as the old man is alive and his name is on the deed. We can leverage the estate for another $5 million. Just get him to sign the insurance update forms I left on the counter. He won't read them. He can barely see straight these days. No one denies a Mercer. Just get it done." I looked up at Franklin. His face was stony. "They took out a $5 million loan against this house," I said, "and they tricked you into co-signing it." "I read it before I signed it," Franklin said, his voice cold. I swapped the pages. "I signed a document authorizing a change in landscapers, but they forged my signature on the loan application. I have the original documents right here." He tapped a manila folder. "I sent copies to Mason Calloway months ago. He was my lawyer before Veronica fired him and hired her friend's son. Mason told me to sit tight and gather more proof." I pulled out my phone and snapped high-resolution photos of the email and the forged loan documents. I sent them to Mason immediately via an encrypted messaging app. "Mason," I typed, "we have the smoking gun on the estate fraud. What else do we need to bury them?" While I waited for a reply, I picked up another file labeled D. Mercer, Personal Financials. I expected to see Dylan's credit card statements or his car payments. Instead, I saw my own name. It was a credit application for a high-limit business line of credit Dylan had applied for 3 months ago under the section labeled Household Assets and Projected Income. He had listed fiancé's projected inheritance assets. He had listed the contents of my checking account, the one I used for bills. He had listed my car, but then he had listed something else, estimated value of future joint assets, post-marriage $2 million. He had taken the small bits of financial information I had shared with him early in our relationship, my salary, my savings, the small 401k I pretended was my only retirement fund, and he had inflated them, presenting me to the bank as a guarantee. He was already spending money he thought I had and money he thought I would earn. He used me as collateral, I said, my voice shaking with fury. He hasn't even married me yet, and he is already porning me. He is a parasite, Franklin said. He needs a host. He thought he found a small, manageable host in you. He didn't know he was latching onto a whale. My phone buzzed. It was Mason. A leer. This is gold. If the signatures are forged, that is bank fraud. If they are using the estate funds for personal high-risk investments, that is embezzlement and elder financial abuse. But we need to prove intent. We need to prove they are neglecting Franklin to expedite the inheritance or silence him. Do you have anything on the living conditions? I looked at Franklin. He looked frail, wrapped in his blanket, surrounded by the remnants of his life. Franklin, I said, I am going to turn on the voice recorder on my phone. I want you to tell me about your weekends. I want you to tell me about the food, the heating, the doctors. Just talk to me. I placed the phone on the table between us. Franklin straightened his back. He spoke for 20 minutes. He spoke with the clarity of a CEO giving a deposition. He detailed how Veronica had canceled his physical therapy sessions to save budget for her summer wardrobe. He described the nights he spent shivering because they lowered the thermostat in his wing to save on oil. He talked about being left alone for days with no one but a visiting nurse who came for 1 hour, while Dylan and Veronica posted photos of themselves drinking champagne on yachts. It wasn't a sob story. It was a ledger of cruelty. It was a systematic reduction of a human being into a liability. They don't hit me, Franklin said to the recorder, his voice dry. They just wait. They look at me like a clock that is ticking too slowly. Last Christmas, Dylan gave me a watch. He said, time is precious, Grantar. I think he was disappointed I was still around to wear it. I stopped the recording. My hands were cold. There is one more thing, Franklin said. He opened a small velvet-lined drawer in the cabinet. He pulled out a document bound in blue paper. This is my last will and testament, the real one. He opened it to the distribution page. I intended to leave the bulk of the estate, 60% to the Mercer Family Charity Trust to support elderly care and housing for the poor. The rest was to be divided between Dylan and his cousins. But Veronica drafted a new one. He tossed a second document onto the pile. In this one, the charity gets nothing. Veronica gets executive control of the firm. Dylan gets the liquid assets. And I'm supposedly the one who requested these changes. Did you sign it? I asked. Not yet, Franklin said. I had a tremor in my hand every time they brought it to me. I spilled coffee on it twice. I ripped the page by accident. Once I have been stalling, but I cannot stall forever. They are getting impatient. I heard Veronica on the phone with a notary. She plans to bring him here next week and guide my hand. I looked at the pile of papers on the floor, the forged loan, the email wishing for his death, the fraudulent credit application using my name, the manipulated will. It wasn't just evidence. It was a map of their souls. It showed exactly who they were: hollow, greedy, and desperate. I took a yellow highlighter and marked the date on the email. I took a pink highlighter and marked the ethics clause in the original partnership agreement. I was connecting the dots, building a web that would track them. We have enough, I said. Mason can file an emergency injunction. We can freeze their assets. We can remove them from the board. No, Franklin said sharply. I looked at him. Lawyers take too long, Franklin said. Injunctions are quiet. They are settled in back rooms with non-disclosure agreements. If you file now, they will settle. They will pay a fine. They will spin a story. They will say I am senile and you are a disgruntled ex-fiancé. He leaned forward, his eyes burning. I don't want a settlement, a leer. I want an execution, a public one. I want their reputation destroyed so thoroughly that no bank on Wall Street will ever cash a check for Mercer again. The wedding, I realized the pre-wedding party. Franklin corrected. Saturday night. Everyone will be there. The investors, the board members, the socialites they care so much about. It is the perfect stage. I looked at the documents. I imagined Dylan's face when he realized his gold digger held the deed to his destruction. I imagined Veronica's face when she realized the old furniture had teeth. I picked up my phone and began typing a new email to Mason. I attached the audio file and the photos of the will. Mason, I wrote, change of plans. Do not file the injunction yet. Prepare the papers for a hostile takeover of the board based on the ethics clause. Prepare the criminal referral for the fraud, but do not serve them. I paused, my thumb hovering over the screen. Bring the papers to the Lakeview Crest estate on Saturday night. Bring the 2 senior board members who still remember my father. We are going to hold a board meeting right in the middle of the toast. I looked up at Franklin. Are you up for a party, Mr. Bursar? Franklin smiled. It was a terrifying smile. I haven't been to a party in years. I think I will wear my tuxedo. I hit send. The email vanished into the ether, carrying with it the end of the Mercer dynasty. I looked at the numbers on the pages scattered around us. They were cold, hard facts. They did not lie. And on Saturday they were going to scream. We did not sleep much that night. The library of the Maple Rest estate became our war room. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and the ozone tang of a brewing storm. This was no longer a domestic dispute. It was a corporate coup d'etat disguised as a family drama. Mason, speaking through an encrypted video call on my laptop, laid out the architecture of our retaliation. He called it the Trojan Horse Protocol. We have 3 layers, Mason explained, his voice tinny through the laptop speakers. Legal, social, and psychological. We cannot just win in court. A Lear court takes years. We need to win in the court of public opinion, and we need to do it while they are still holding the champagne glasses. Franklin sat in his leather chair, a blanket draped over his knees, but his eyes were sharp. He looked like a general reviewing a battle map. First, the legal framework, Franklin said. I need to transfer the weapon to you. The weapon was his voting power. Franklin and Mason had spent the last 3 hours drafting a complex amendment to his estate planning. In the eyes of the law, Franklin was restructuring his assets into a blind trust for efficiency. In reality, he was transferring the proxy voting rights of his founding shares to a shell entity controlled entirely by the Sycamore Trust, and the sole trustee of the Sycamore Trust was me. By the time the sun rises on Saturday, Mason said, Lear will technically have the controlling vote in any board meeting regarding ethical violations, but they won't know it. The entity name is me. They will just think it is another one of Franklin's boring administrative moves. They never read the fine print. Franklin muttered, signing his name on the digital pad I held out to him. His hand was steady. They only read the bottom line. Phase 2, Mason continued. The board. I have arranged a private breakfast tomorrow morning with Arthur Pendleton and George Calloway. They are the old guard. They remember when Mercer and Hale stood for integrity. They despise Dylan's high-risk leverage strategy. But they think they are outnumbered. I am going to show them the proof of the fraud. I am going to tell them my new strategic partner is stepping in to clean the house. Don't tell them it is me, I said. No. Mason agreed. I will tell them it is the daughter of David Phillips. That name still carries weight with men like Arthur. It will buy us their silence and their support when the moment comes. Then came the part that required my acting skills, the psychological trap. I had to play the part of the obedient, slightly dim-witted fiancé one last time. The next morning, I drove back to the city to meet Dylan and Veronica at their lawyer's office. They had presented the prenuptial agreement to me as a formality, something to get out of the way before the party. The office was glass and steel, designed to intimidate. Veronica sat across from me, looking bored. Dylan was checking his watch. Here it is, sweetie, Dylan said, sliding a thick document across the mahogany table. Standard stuff. Just separates what is mine from what is yours. It protects both of us. I picked up the heavy document. I pretended to read the first page, moving my lips slightly as if the legal jargon was difficult for me. It looks very complicated, I said softly. It is just legal speak, Veronica said, examining her manicure. Just sign it, Lear. We have a lunch reservation at 1. I understand, I said. But my father did leave me a few things, small things, sentimental accounts. I just want to make sure those are protected, too. Would it be okay if I took this home tonight? I just want to read it properly. Maybe show it to a family friend who knows about wills." Veronica let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound of pure derision. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said. "Aaliyah, we are talking about protecting a $50 million portfolio. I hardly think your little savings account needs a special clause. But fine, if it makes you feel important, take it home. Just bring it back signed tomorrow." She thought I was pathetic. She thought I was trying to cling to my few thousand while marrying into millions. I took the document home, but I did not show it to a family friend. I scanned it and sent it to Mason. Within 2 hours, Mason sent back an addendum. It looked identical to the font and style of the original document. It was a single page titled Schedule C, Premarital Asset Exclusion and Liability Separation. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard clause listing my small assets, but the wording was lethal. Mason had included a provision stating that any debt incurred by one party using the name, image, or assumed future assets of the other party without express written consent shall be the sole liability of the borrowing party, and any assets held by the innocent party prior to the marriage are immune to any marital claim or debt restructuring. In plain English, when the banks realized Dylan had committed fraud to get his loans, they could not come after my money to pay it back. And because Dylan was signing this, he was legally acknowledging that he had no right to my history. I met Dylan that evening at his apartment. I had the signed prenup with Mason's page inserted neatly in the middle in my bag. I also had a recording app running on my phone, which was placed face down on the coffee table. "I signed it," I said, handing him the folder. He didn't even check it. He just tossed it onto the sidebar. "Great," he said, pouring himself a drink. "See, that wasn't so hard." "It felt a little hard," I said, making my voice tremble. "It feels like you don't trust me, Dylan. It feels like you think I am just after your money." I needed him to say it. I needed the coercion on tape. Dylan sighed, walking over to me. He put his hands on my shoulders. He smelled of scotch and entitlement. "Babe, look," he said, his tone patronizing. "It is not about trust. It is about optics. My mom worries. She thinks everyone is out to get us. If you didn't sign this, she would never let up. She would think you were just here for the cash. We have to do this to make everyone comfortable. We have to prove to them that you are in this for the right reasons." "So, if I didn't sign it, you wouldn't marry me?" I asked. "I mean, it would be a deal breaker for the family," Dylan admitted. "We can't have loose ends, but you did sign it. So now we are safe." "You are safe. I am going to take care of you. Aaliyah, you won't need your own money anyway." Click. I had him. He had admitted that the marriage was conditional on the financial contract, and he had framed it as a way to prove I wasn't a gold digger. When the truth came out that he was the one spending my projected money, this recording would paint him as a manipulative predator. "You are right," I said, forcing a smile. "I feel much better now." Later that night, I called Franklin. "The trap is set," I told him. "Good," Franklin rasped. "Now we need the stage." "The party," I said. "Saturday night." "Exactly," Franklin said. "Lakeview Crest Estate. It is the perfect venue. All the investors will be there. All the people Veronica tries to impress. We will do it during the toasts. When they are at their highest, we will pull the floor out." I paused. There was one thing that had been gnawing at me. "Franklin," I said, "I have a condition." "Name it." "We target Dylan and Veronica," I said firmly. "Only them. I know Dylan has a younger cousin, Sophie. She is 18. She is innocent in this. I don't want her humiliated. I don't want the staff to lose their jobs. This needs to be a surgical strike, not a carpet bombing." Franklin was silent for a moment. "You are soft, Aaliyah. That is dangerous." "It is not soft," I countered. "It is precise. If we hurt innocent people, we are no better than they are. I want to destroy their greed, not their family tree." "Fair enough," Franklin agreed. "We aim for the head. The rest of the body can survive." Mason added one final layer of security. He called it the dead man's switch. "I have uploaded all the evidence, the fraud documents, the audio recordings, the proof of your ownership to a secure cloud server." Mason told me I have configured a trigger. If you do not check in with me by midnight on Saturday, or if anything happens to you, the entire file will automatically be emailed to the district attorney, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the editor of the New York Times." "That seems extreme," I said. "They are desperate people, Aaliyah," Mason said darkly. "Desperate people do violent things when they are cornered. I want them to know that if they touch a hair on your head, they go to prison for 20 years. I will send a courier to Veronica tomorrow morning with a sealed letter. It will simply say that an insurance file exists and will be released if there are any accidents. She won't know what is in it, but it will make her hesitate." I looked at the plan. It was terrifying. It was brilliant. It was the kind of strategy my father would have designed for a hostile takeover, but stripped of all mercy. "Are you ready for this?" Franklin asked me, his voice sounding younger than it had in days. "I am," I said. "Good," Franklin chuckled. The sound was dry and sharp, like dead wood snapping. "If they want to perform a play called The Poor Girl and the Prince, I say we let them. Let them say their lines. Let them wear their costumes. Let them think they have written the ending." He paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "But when the curtain falls, Aaliyah, the whole theater is going to realize that they were standing on a trap door, and they are going to see that the real gold mine was never the one they were bragging about. It was the one they were trying to bury." "Saturday," I whispered. "Saturday," Franklin echoed. "We are something stunning, my dear. We are going to a funeral." Friday morning arrived with the chaotic energy of a hurricane made entirely of silk and hairspray. The retreat was starting, and for Veronica and Dylan, this was not a vacation. It was a tactical deployment. I stood in the grand foyer holding a stack of garment bags that probably cost more than my father's first car. Dylan was pacing back and forth, shouting into his earpiece about a mezzanine loan that needed to close by Tuesday. Veronica was directing the housekeeper with the precision of a drill sergeant, listing off the skincare products she absolutely could not survive 4 days without. They moved around Franklin as if he were a piece of furniture that had been placed inconveniently in the hallway. He sat in his wheelchair near the door, a heavy wool blanket tucked around his legs, despite the fact that the heating was finally on. He looked small. He looked erased. "Now, Aaliyah," Veronica said, snapping her fingers to get my attention. She did not look me in the eye. She was busy checking her reflection in the hallway mirror, smoothing out a wrinkle in her linen traveling suit. I left a note on the kitchen island. It has the schedule for his pills. Do not mess it up. The beta blockers are crucial. If his pressure spikes, call Dr. Evans. But honestly, Evans charges a fortune for weekend calls, so try to keep him calm. She turned to Dylan, lowering her voice, but in the echoing acoustics of the marble entryway, every word was crystal clear. "We need to get going," she said. "The investors are boarding at noon. We cannot be late." Then she glanced at Franklin, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "Honestly, if he holds on for another few years, it is good for the stock stability. The market likes the legacy image, but between you and me, it is exhausting keeping up the charade. I feel like I'm running a nursing home." I saw Franklin's hands tighten on the armrests of his wheelchair. His knuckles turned white. He did not look up. He did not speak. He just stared at the floor, absorbing the insult like a man who had been struck so many times he had forgotten how to flinch. Dylan laughed. It was a short, distracted sound. "Yeah, well, just make sure he's still breathing when we get back. I need his signature for the refinancing next week." He walked over to me and gave me a quick performative kiss on the cheek. "Thanks for doing this, babe," he said. "You are a lifesaver. Seriously, we would have had to pay a nurse triple for the weekend rate. You are the best." "Have fun," I said. My voice was calm, but inside I was screaming. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind them, and the sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Then silence. The sudden quiet was heavy. The frantic energy of their ambition had been sucked out of the room, leaving behind the stale, cold reality of the house they left behind. I turned to Franklin. He was still looking at the floor. "They are gone," I said softly. He let out a long, ragged breath, his shoulders slumping. Finally he whispered, "The sharks have gone to swim with the other sharks." I wheeled him into the kitchen. The note Veronica had mentioned was stuck to the granite countertop with a magnet. I picked it up. It was written in her sharp, angular handwriting. It listed 3 medication times and a single phone number. At the bottom she had scrolled, "Don't let him drink coffee. It makes him jittery." I opened the refrigerator to check the food situation. I stared. The massive stainless steel appliance, which looked like it belonged in a professional restaurant, was almost empty. On the top shelf there was a bottle of artisanal water and a jar of olives. On the middle shelf sat 3 plastic containers of what looked like gray sludge leftovers from a meal the staff had made days ago. In the freezer, I found a stack of generic frozen dinners. Salisbury steak, macaroni and cheese, the kind you buy for $2 when you are a broke college student. I turned and looked at the wine rack built into the far wall. It was stocked with bottles of Bordeaux and Cabernet that I knew retailed for hundreds of dollars each. They had $5,000 worth of wine on the wall and $5 worth of food for the man who bought the house. "This is unacceptable," I said, slamming the freezer door shut. "It is efficient," Franklin said from the doorway. His voice was dry. "Why waste prime rib on an old man who spills half of it?" That is Veronica's logic. "Well, Veronica is not here," I said, "and I am not feeding you cardboard." I grabbed my car keys. "I am going to the market. I will be back in 40 minutes. Do you need anything specific?" Franklin looked at me surprised. "Fresh fruit," he said softly. "I haven't had a fresh peach in 6 months." I drove to the nearest gourmet grocery and bought everything. I bought fresh vegetables, a whole roasting chicken, Herb's crusty bread, and the ripest peaches I could find. I put it all on my own credit card, the one I usually hesitated to use. But today I swiped it with a sense of righteous satisfaction. When I returned, the house felt different. I turned on the lights in the kitchen, chasing away the gloom. I put on some jazz music from my phone, low and smooth. For the next 2 hours, I cooked. I roasted the chicken with lemon and rosemary. I mashed potatoes with real butter and cream. I sautéed green beans with garlic. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and savory, pushing back the scent of lemon polish and neglect. When I placed the plate in front of Franklin, his hands were shaking. He stared at the steam rising from the chicken. "You cooked this," he said. It wasn't a question. "I did," I said, sitting down across from him with my own plate. "I hope you like rosemary." He picked up his fork and took a small bite. He chewed slowly, closing his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "It is hot," he said. "Of course it is hot," I said. "No." He shook his head. "I mean, someone made it for me. Not the staff, not a nurse." There. He looked at me, and the mask of the cynical tycoon slipped completely. "Thank you, Aaliyah." We ate in companionable silence for a while. Then, as the wine I had opened one of the good bottles, ignoring Veronica's rules, began to loosen the knots in his chest, Franklin started to talk. He told me about his youth. He hadn't been born into money. He grew up in a tenement in Chicago, the son of a dock worker. "I fought for every inch," he told me, gesturing with a piece of bread. "People see the suit, they see the building with my name on it, and they think I was born in a boardroom. They don't know I used to scrub floors to pay for night school." He took a sip of wine. "I met a woman once before I built all this. Her name was Alina. She was a librarian. She didn't care about stocks or margins. She just liked that I made her laugh. What happened to her?" I asked. "I got ambitious," Franklin said, his voice tinged with a regret that had aged 50 years. "I thought I needed to be someone else, to be worthy of a legacy. I thought I needed a wife who could host galas, not one who read books in the park. So I let her go, and I married into a good family. I married for connections." He looked at me piercingly. "I built an empire, Aaliyah, but I built it in a cold house, and now I am dying in one." I reached across the table and took his hand. It was frail, the skin thin as paper, but his grip was surprisingly strong. "I understand," I said. "My parents, they had money, Franklin, real money, but we lived like we didn't. When I was little, I didn't understand why. Now I do." I told him about the men I had dated before Dylan, the ones who looked at my address and lost interest, the ones who looked at my shoes and made assumptions, and the one who found out about the trust fund and turned into a different person entirely. I have spent my whole adult life trying to prove that I am worth something without the money, I confessed. I wanted someone to love me for the girl who clips coupons. I thought Dylan was that guy. I thought he admired my grit. He doesn't admire your grit, Franklin said gently. He admires his own reflection in your struggle. It makes him feel tall to stand next to someone he thinks is small. I know, I said. I know that now. But you are not small, Franklin said. You are the biggest thing that has walked into this house in 20 years. And I'm not talking about your bank account. I am talking about your backbone. I am going to make sure you are treated right, Franklin. I said, even after this is over, even after the wedding is canceled, I am not leaving you to rot in this wing. I believe you. He said, maybe I wasn't a good father to my son. Maybe I created the monster that Veronica became. But I can try to be a decent ally to you. I can do that much. Just then the doorbell rang. I frowned. Are you expecting anyone? No one visits me, Franklin said. I went to the door. Standing on the porch were an elderly couple holding a foil-covered dish. Oh, the woman said, looking surprised to see me. Hello, we are the Reynolds from next door. We saw the lights on. We haven't seen lights on in the kitchen on a Friday night in, well, years. Please come in, I said, stepping back. They walked into the foyer, looking around tentatively. We brought a peach pie, Mr. Reynolds said, holding up the dish. We grew the peaches ourselves. We used to bring them over for Franklin, but well, Mrs. Mercer Veronica, she told us Franklin couldn't have sugar and that we shouldn't disturb him. He loves peaches, I said, taking the pie. We were just talking about them. Please come join us. When Franklin saw them, his face lit up. George, Martha, Franklin, Mrs. Reynolds cried. Oh, look at you. We thought, well, Veronica told us you were bedridden. She said you didn't recognize people anymore. She says a lot of things, Franklin grumbled, but he was smiling. For the next hour, the kitchen was filled with actual laughter. The Reynolds told stories about the neighborhood. They complained about the noise from Dylan's parties. It is terrible, Mrs. Reynolds whispered to me, the music goes until 4:00 in the morning, and poor Franklin here, trapped in the house. We always say, why doesn't anyone sit with him on the porch anymore? We see the staff come and go, but never family. It is a sin, really. I pulled out my phone under the table. I opened the Notes app and wrote down the time and the exact quote. Witness testimony. Neighbors confirm isolation and misleading statements about health. It wasn't just gossip. It was evidence. If Veronica ever tried to claim she was a devoted caregiver, George and Martha Reynolds would be the witnesses who sank her. By 9:00, the Reynolds had left, promising to come back the next day with fresh garden tomatoes. Franklin was exhausted, but it was a good exhaustion. The gray pallor had left his skin, replaced by a faint flush of color. We moved to the small den off the kitchen. I turned on the television and found an old black and white movie. It was Casablanca. I saw this in the theater, Franklin murmured, his eyes heavy. Bobart was the only man who could make cynicism look romantic. I sat on the sofa next to his wheelchair. The flickering light of the screen danced across the room. Outside, the wind howled through the manicured trees of the estate, but inside, for the first time, it felt safe. About halfway through the movie, I felt a weight on my shoulder. Franklin had fallen asleep. His head had lolled to the side, resting against me. He looked so fragile in his sleep, his mouth slightly open, his breathing rasping softly. I sat very still, afraid to move and wake him. I looked at the man who had been a titan of industry, the man whose name was etched in stone on skyscrapers. Right now, he was just a lonely grandfather who had been starved of kindness. I realized then that my mission had changed. When I started this, it was about revenge. It was about teaching Dylan a lesson. It was about protecting my pride. But as I sat there, listening to the rhythm of Franklin's breathing, I knew it was more than that. I wasn't just going to expose Dylan. I was going to liberate Franklin. I was going to use every cent of the Sycamore Trust, every lawyer Mason could hire, and every ounce of power I possessed to ensure that this man spent his final years with dignity. They wanted a war, fine. I looked at the sleeping old man and gently pulled the blanket up to his chin. Sleep well, Franklin, I whispered into the darkness. Because on Saturday we are going to wake everybody up. The weekend at the estate became a masterclass in psychological warfare. While Dylan was sipping champagne on a yacht in the Hamptons, believing he was the master of the universe, I was sitting in his grandfather's study, carefully dismantling his reality one phone call at a time. It was Saturday afternoon. The sun was streaming through the heavy velvet curtains, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like suspended secrets. Franklin sat in his wheelchair next to the desk, a cup of tea in his trembling hand. My phone lay in the center of the mahogany surface, the recording app open and running. "Ready," I whispered. Franklin nodded, his eyes hard as flint. "Reel him in." I dialed Dylan's number. He picked up on the third ring. I could hear the whip of wind against a microphone and the distinct rhythmic thrum of a boat engine. "Hey, big," Dylan's voice shouted over the noise. "Can't talk long. We are just docking at Montauk. The investors are loving the boat. What is up?" "I am sorry to bother you, Dylan," I said, pitching my voice to sound small and anxious. "It is just that the grocery bill for the house was higher than I expected and the visiting nurse company called. They said the rates for weekend emergency care are double what we thought. I put it on my card, but I'm starting to get worried. I don't know if I can stretch my budget this month." I heard him sigh, a sound of exaggerated patience. "Aaliyah, relax," he said. "Stop stressing about pennies. Look, this is exactly why we are doing the prenup. Once we are married, my assets stay mine, which means I have the liquidity to handle the overhead. You don't have to worry about the maintenance costs." I glanced at Franklin. His jaw tightened. Overhead maintenance costs. He was talking about his grandfather light. He was a leaky roof. "I know," I said, keeping my voice trembling. "It just feels like a lot. Franklin seems so fragile. Are you sure we can afford to keep him here? Maybe a facility would be cheaper." "No," Dylan said sharply. "No facility. As long as he's in the house, the estate tax exemptions apply. Plus, the market likes the image of the founder living on the ancestral property. It is good branding. Just keep him alive and comfortable. It is a steal of a deal compared to losing the tax write-off." "Okay," I said. "I trust you, Dylan. You are so good with money. My dad was the same way. I think although he was more about saving than investing." I paused, letting the silence hang for a second before dropping the first piece of bait. "Actually, speaking of my dad," I said, sounding hesitant, "I was looking through that old box of papers I told you about for the prenup review. I found some certificates. I think they are stocks, but the names are weird. Phillips Quantum something, and some fund called Sycamore. Do you think they are worth anything? Or should I just shred them?" The background noise on Dylan's end seemed to drop away. The wind was still there, but his attention had shifted entirely. "Don't shred anything," he said, his voice sudden and sharp. "What kind of certificates? How old are they?" "Oh, 15 years, maybe," I said. "There is a number on one. It says 50,000 shares. Is that a lot?" I was just going to throw them out because I didn't want to clutter our new apartment. "Do not throw them out," Dylan commanded. The greedy edge in his voice was unmistakable. The man who had called me a gold digger 48 hours ago was suddenly salivating at the scent of fresh money. "Send me a picture right now. I will have my guys look at it. If it is real, we can add it to the marital assets. It could help with the down payment on the new penthouse." "But I thought the prenup kept everything separate," I asked innocently. "Well, yeah," Dylan stammered. "But if we commingle it now before the wedding, it simplifies things. Just send the picture, Aaliyah. Don't be stupid." "Okay," I said. "I will send it later. Go have fun." I hung up. Franklin let out a low whistle. He took the bait so hard he swallowed the hook. "He did," I said, saving the recording. "Now for step 2. I stood up and walked over to Franklin. I knelt beside his wheelchair, holding up my phone for a selfie. "Smile," I said. "I don't smile." Franklin grumbled, but he softened his expression enough to look merely contemplative rather than furious. I snapped the photo. It showed me looking fresh-faced and studious with a stack of old leather-bound ledgers open on the desk in front of me. Franklin was next to me, pointing at a page. I sent it to Dylan with a caption, "I'm starting to understand the finance world a little better." Grandpa Franklin is telling me so many interesting stories about how the company started. He remembers everything. I hit send. Now we wait. I said we did not have to wait long. At that exact moment, 300 m away in the city, Mason Calloway was executing the second prong of our attack. He had sent a formal encrypted legal notice to the board of directors of Mercer and Hale Capital. The notice was on behalf of an undisclosed minority shareholder controlled by the Sycamore Trust. The notice demanded an immediate internal audit of all executive loans taken out against the Maplerist estate in the last 5 years, citing potential fiduciary irregularities. It did not name Dillon directly. It did not name Veronica, but it was a precision strike. It landed in the inbox of the compliance officer at 4 in the afternoon on a Saturday, a time designed to cause maximum panic because no one could call the bank to verify anything until Monday morning. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Dillon. I answered on speaker. "What are you doing?" he hissed. He sounded breathless, like he had walked away from the party to hide in a bathroom. "I am making soup," I said calmly. "Why, is something wrong? Why are you looking at the ledgers?" Dillon demanded. "I got your text. Why is Franklin talking to you about business? He is seno, a liar. He doesn't know what year it is. You shouldn't listen to him. He seems pretty lucid to me," I said lightly. "He was just telling me about a loan, something about $5 million for a mezzanine fund. He said he didn't remember signing it. Isn't that funny? Old people are so forgetful." There was a silence on the other end so profound I thought the call had dropped. "He is confused," Dillon said. His voice was tight, vibrating with a mixture of fear and rage. "Listen to me, Lear. Put the books away. Do not let him talk to anyone. Do not let him answer the phone. If anyone calls the house, any lawyers, any bank, you tell them he is asleep. Do you understand me?" "You sound stressed, Dillon." I said, "Is everything okay at the retreat? Are the investors happy?" "The investors are asking questions." He snapped. "Because someone, look, just stay in your lane. Okay, you are there to make sure he takes his pills and doesn't die. You are not there to play forensic accountant. You don't understand this world. It is complicated. It is aggressive. You are just too soft for this." I looked at Franklin. He was grinning like a shark. "You are right," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't understand your world, Dillon. I am just a designer. I am just the girl you are marrying." I paused. "But I have to ask, in your world, what am I? Am I a partner, or am I just another asset you are trying to manage?" "Jesus Christ," Dillon groaned. I heard a burst of laughter in the background. "Likely Landon or Chase." "Not now, Aaliyah. Don't get emotional on me. We are building a future here. Just do what I say. Put the books away. I will be home tomorrow." He hung up. "He is rattling," Franklin observed with satisfaction. "He is realizing that the foundation of his house is made of sand, and the tide is coming in." I saved the second recording. "One more thing," I said. "I need to know exactly how he is selling me to these people. I need the smoking gun that proves he is using our relationship as a marketing tool." I waited until late that night. It was nearly 11:00. I knew the retreat would be in full swing. The alcohol would be flowing. The inhibitions would be lowered. I sent a text to Dillon. "I am sorry for asking so many questions earlier. I know you are working hard for us. I am just proud of you. I hope the investors love you as much as I do." It was the perfect ego stroke. It was exactly what a narcissist needed to hear when he was feeling insecure. 10 minutes later, a voice note appeared on my screen. I pressed play. Dillon's voice was slurred, thick with scotch and arrogance. There was music thumping in the background. "Thanks, babe," he said. "You have no idea. I am crushing it. I just closed the deal with the Sterling Group. You know what sealed it? I showed them your picture, the one of you in the cheap dress from our first date. I told them, look, I am not some trust fund brat. I am marrying a girl who built herself up from nothing. I am grounded." They ate it up, Aaliyah. They love the story, the poor designer and the finance mogul. It makes me look trustworthy. You are literally the best investment I ever made. The recording ended. I sat in the silence of the kitchen, staring at the phone. The best investment I ever made. not the woman he loved, not his partner. An investment, a prop to make him look trustworthy to men who had even more money than he did. That is it, Franklin said softly from the doorway. He had wheeled himself in to get a glass of water. That is the one. Yes, I said. That is the one. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder on the desktop. I named it simply for the party. I dragged the audio files into the folder. I dragged the photos of the forged documents. I dragged the scan of the prenup with the liability clause he had blindly signed. I dragged the transcript of his gold digger comments from the hotel hallway. I organized them by time and subject. It was a digital dossier of a man's character assassination, written entirely in his own words. I looked at the screen. It was midnight. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt charged. It felt like a loaded cannon waiting for a spark. Go to bed, Aaliyah, Franklin said gently. Immediate rest. Tomorrow is Sunday. They come back, and we have to put the masks back on for one more day. I can do it, I said, closing the laptop with a definitive click. I can be the clown for 24 more hours. You are not the clown, Franklin said, turning his wheelchair back toward the hallway. You are the ringmaster, and the circus is about to catch fire. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark grounds of the estate. Somewhere out there, Dylan was toasting his success, thinking he had won. He thought he had secured his funding. He thought he had silenced his grandfather. He thought he had controlled his fiancé. He had no idea that the girl he thought was a gold digger had just bought the bank. Dylan and Veronica returned on Monday morning with the aggressive energy of people who had spent 4 days drinking premium tequila and believing their own press releases. They swept into the house in a whirlwind of designer, luggage, and sea salt. Their skin bronzed a deep, expensive tan that contrasted sharply with the pale fluorescent lit exhaustion I had been living in. They did not ask how the weekend went. They did not go to the East Wing to check if Franklin was still breathing. God, the traffic on the expressway was a nightmare, Veronica complained, throwing her Hermes scarf onto the entryway table. Aaliyah, be a dear and tell the staff to unpack the car and make sure my silk wrap is steamed immediately. I need it for the rehearsal dinner. Did you have a good time? I asked, standing in the foyer with my hands clasped in front of me, playing the role of the beautiful, slightly invisible daughter-in-law. Productive, Dylan corrected, walking past me while checking emails on his phone. We locked in 3 verbal commitments for the new fund. The Sterling Dyes are practically betting to get in. They love the whole family legacy angle. He stopped and looked at me, but he wasn't really seeing me. He was inspecting a prop. You look tired, he noted, frowning. Make sure you get a facial before Saturday. We have the pre-wedding party at Lakeview Crest. The lighting there is unforgiving, and I need you glowing. We are selling a fairy tale. Remember, I will be ready. I promised. Don't worry about me. I am not worried about you. Dylan said, already walking away toward his office. I am worried about the pictures. I watched him go a week ago. That comment would have hurt. Now it just felt like data. Another line of code in the program I was about to crash. The rest of the week passed in a blur of frantic preparation. The target was Saturday night. The venue was the Lakeview Crest estate. Dylan was incredibly proud of securing the location. He had spent days bragging to his friends that he had pulled strings, called in favors, and used his exclusive network to rent the historic lakeside mansion for the evening. It is usually booked 2 years in advance. He had told Landon on the phone, his voice loud enough for the whole house to hear. But you know when you know the right people. Doors open. The owners love me. They gave us the friends and family rate. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Dylan didn't know the right people. He knew a shell company. The Lakeview Crest estate was part of a portfolio of distressed luxury properties my father had acquired 15 years ago. It was currently owned by a holding company called LVC Management, which was a subsidiary of the Sycamore Trust. I was the landlord. I had approved the rental application. I had even instructed the management team to give him the friends and family rate because I wanted him to feel powerful. I wanted him to feel like the king of the castle right before I evicted him. On Saturday afternoon, the house was a hive of activity. Franklin, who had been resting all week, suddenly wheeled himself into the living room. Veronica was directing the florists. She stopped when she saw him. "Oh, Franklin," she sighed. "What are you doing up? The nurse will be here soon to put you to bed. We have to leave for the venue in an hour." "I am coming with you," Franklin said. His voice was not the raspy whisper they were used to. It was clear. It was firm. Veronica blinked. "Excuse me. Don't be ridiculous. It is a loud party. You will get confused. You will be tired. It is better if you stay here, where it is quiet." "I am the founder of the company you are celebrating," Franklin said, gripping the armrests of his chair. "And I am the grandfather of the groom. People will ask where I am. Do you want to tell the investors that you locked the patriarch in the attic, or do you want to wheel me out for a few photos so you can show everyone how much you care about family?" He knew exactly which button to push. He appealed to her vanity. Veronica pursed her lips, calculating. "Fine, but you leave right after the toasts, and if you spill anything on your suit, I am sending you to the car immediately. I will be on my best behavior," Franklin promised. He looked at me and winked. It was a subtle movement, imperceptible to anyone else, but it signaled that the game was on. I left the house early, telling Dylan I needed to check on the catering setup. In reality, I had a meeting in the parking lot of a diner 3 miles from the venue. Mason Calloway was waiting for me in his nondescript sedan. He didn't get out. He just rolled down the window and handed me a thick manila envelope. "Everything is in there," Mason said. His face was grim. Certified copies of the original partnership agreement with the ethics clause, the loan documents with the forged signatures authenticated by a handwriting expert I flew in yesterday, the audio transcripts, and the new codicil to Franklin's will signed, witnessed, and notarized this morning. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, like a brick of gold or a loaded gun. "Are you sure about this, Aleer?" Mason asked. "Once you walk into that room and open this envelope, there is no going back. You are declaring war on a family that fights dirty." "They started the war, Mason." I said. "I am just finishing it. The board members, Arthur and George, are already inside the venue," Mason informed me. "They are incognito. I told them to wait for your signal. They are expecting a presentation on corporate restructuring. They have no idea they are about to witness a beheading." "Thank you, Mason," I said. I drove to the Lakeview Crest estate. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood orange. The mansion stood on the hill, magnificent and imposing, its windows glowing with golden light. It was my house. Tonight, I was taking it back. I went to the bridal suite to change. I had bought a dress specifically for this night. It was not the pastel flowery thing Veronica had suggested. It was black, a sleek silk column dress that hugged my frame and fell to the floor like liquid ink. It was simple, severe, and elegant. It was a dress for a woman who handles her own business. I pulled my hair back into a tight shiny. I applied my makeup with precision, sharp eyeliner, deep red lipstick. Then I opened the small velvet box I had brought with me. Inside lay a pair of vintage diamond drop earrings. They belonged to my mother. They were the only flashy thing she had ever owned. A gift from my father when he sold his first patent. I fastened them to my ears. The cold metal against my skin felt like a reminder. Don't let a man know what you are worth until you know who he is. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I didn't look like the lucky girl Dylan had found. I looked like the CEO of my own life. "Are you ready to lose it all?" I whispered to my reflection. I thought about the fake friends, the condescending dinners, the constant feeling of being evaluated and found wanting. I thought about Dylan using my credit score to leverage his debt while mocking me behind my back. "I am not losing anything," I answered myself. "I am taking out the trash." I walked out of the suite and stood on the balcony overlooking the grand ballroom. The party was in full swing. 200 guests were milling about holding crystal floods of champagne. The air was filled with the murmur of networking and the clink of glass. I saw Dylan down below. He was holding court, near the bar, flanked by Landon and Chase. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, his face flushed with triumph. I moved closer to the railing, hidden by a large fern, and listened. "Man, this place is insane." Landon was saying, "You really outdid yourself." "I told you." Dylan laughed, taking a sip of his drink. When you have the vision, the world aligns. We are going to close the sterling deal tonight, and then once the wedding is done and the prenup is filed, I am clear. I will have the capital, the status, and the obedient wife to run the domestic side. Is she cool with the prenup? Chase asked. She cried a little. Dylan scoffed. Gave me some speech about trust. But she signed it. She knows she needs me. Where else is she going to fight a life like this? She will get over it. Women always do when they see the credit card limit. They laughed. It was the sound of men who had never been told no. Little do they know, I whispered. I made my way down the grand staircase, heads turned as I descended. The black dress was a statement. I wasn't blending in anymore. I found the audiovisual technician at the control booth in the back of the room. He was a young guy I had hired personally, bypassing Dylan's preferred vendor. Is the file ready? I asked. Loaded and queued, he said, tapping his laptop. The slideshow Dylan sent is in the trash. Your video is set to play on your cue. Perfect. I said when I touched the remote. You kill the house lights and boost the audio. I want them to hear every breath. You got it, boss. He said. I walked into the crowd. I smiled. I shook hands. I accepted compliments on the venue from people who had no idea they were drinking my wine in my living room. Then the doors opened and Franklin arrived. He did not come in quietly. Mr. Reynolds, wearing his Sunday best, pushed the wheelchair, but Franklin wasn't slumped over. He was sitting bolt upright. He was wearing a tuxedo that was 20 years old, but fit him perfectly. His silver hair was combed back. His eyes were scanning the room like a predator. A hush fell over the crowd near the entrance. People hadn't seen Franklin Mercer in public in years. The rumor was that he was senile, bedridden, barely coherent. Good evening, Franklin boomed. His voice was strong, projected from his diaphragm. I hope you are all enjoying the party. I see you are drinking the '96 vintage. Excellent choice. Veronica froze. She was standing near the shrimp tower and her glass paused halfway to her mouth. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She rushed over, her smile tight and panic in her eyes. Franklin, Dad, we didn't expect you to be so animated. I took a nap, Franklin said dryly. Amazing what a little rest and a decent meal can do. Lear has been taking excellent care of me. He looked at me across the room. We locked eyes. The alliance was sealed. Dylan hurried over, looking nervous. Grandpa, great to see you. We were just about to start the presentation. Maybe you want to sit in the back. It might be loud. Nonsense, Franklin said. I want a front row seat. I want to see this vision you keep talking about. Dylan, I want to see exactly what you have built. Mr. Reynolds wheeled him to the very front, right next to the projection screen. Franklin parked the chair, crossed his legs, and folded his hands in his lap. He looked like a judge waiting for the court to come to order. The tension in the room was rising. The investors sensed it. They looked from Dylan's sweaty forehead to Franklin's steely gaze to my calm dark figure standing in the shadows. The master of ceremonies, a hired professional with a radio voice, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, if I could have your attention, we have a very special presentation tonight. A tribute to the love story of Dylan and Aaliyah and the bright future of the Mercer family. The lights began to dim. The room went silent. Dylan walked to the center of the floor, a microphone in his hand. He looked confident, but I could see the tremor in his fingers. Thank you all for coming, Dylan said. Tonight is about love, but it is also about partnership, about finding that person who supports your dreams. Lear has been my rock, and I wanted to share a little video that captures our journey. He gestured to the screen. He thought he was about to show a montage of us on vacations set to a romantic ballad designed to make him look like a benevolent provider. I reached into my clutch bag, my fingers closed around the small, cold plastic of the remote control. I looked at Veronica, whose face was a mask of bored superiority. I looked at Dylan, who was grinning at his rich friends waiting for applause. I looked at Franklin, who gave me a single, sharp nod. The curtain falls now, I thought. I stepped out of the shadows and stood next to the screen. Actually, Dylan, I said, my voice ringing out clearly in the sudden silence. I didn't use a microphone, but the acoustics of the room carried my voice to every corner. Dylan turned surprised. "Abe, what are you doing?" "The video is starting." "I know," I said. "I just wanted to make sure we showed the right version." The director's cut. I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life, but there was no romantic music. There was no slow-motion footage of us kissing on a beach. Instead, a waveform appeared on the screen, a jagged green line on a black background, and then Dylan's voice, amplified to concert volume, boomed through the speakers. "She's a total gold digger, bro. But it is fine. I keep her around. She looks good on my arm." The glass dropped from Veronica's hand and shattered on the floor. The sound was swallowed by the recording, which continued relentlessly. "I keep the assets in a separate trust. She would technically end up owing money. She doesn't understand the law." The smile slid off Dylan's face like melting wax. I stood there, the remote in my hand, watching the storm break. The smile on my face was small, polite, and absolutely lethal. The show had begun. The video began exactly as Dylan had intended. Soft acoustic guitar music filled the ballroom on the massive projection screen. A montage of photos faded in and out. There was a picture of us at the beach, windy, blown and smiling. A shot of us at a pumpkin patch looking like the ideal American couple. A candid of Dylan looking at me with what appeared to be adoration. The crowd cooped collectively. Dylan stood by the stage, a glass of champagne in his hand, beaming. He looked at the investors, then at me, his eyes saying, "See, I told you I could sell it." Then the screen flickered. The acoustic guitar cut out abruptly, replaced by a sharp screech of static. The romantic photos vanished. In their place, a stark digital interface appeared on the screen. It was the visualizer of an audio recording app. A single green line sat flat against a black background. Text appeared in bold white letters, "When you think the microphone is off." The green line spiked. "She's a total gold digger, bro." Dylan's voice boomed through the high-fidelity speakers, clear as a bell. "But it is fine. I keep her around. She looks good on my arm and loves the idea of my money." The room was so quiet that you could hear the ice melting in the buckets on screen. The date of the recording appeared last week. Then came the laughter, the distinctive, braying laugh of Landon and Chase. The recording jumped to the next clip. "I already have the lawyers draft the prenup. It is ironclad. If we divorced, she gets 0. Actually, less than 0. She doesn't understand the law." Dylan's smile had frozen into a ridge of terror. He took a step toward the technician booth, waving his hand frantically. "Cut it. Cut the feed. It is a glitch." But the technician, my paid employee, did not move. The next clip played louder this time. "Just keep him alive and comfortable. It is a steal of a deal compared to losing the tax write-off. The market likes the image of the founder living on ancestral property. It is good branding." Franklin sat in his wheelchair at the front of the room, his back straight as a steel rod, staring at the screen with a look of grim vindication. Veronica turned white, her hand flying to her throat to cover her diamond necklace. The final clip was the voice note Dylan had sent me just 24 hours ago. I told them, "Look, I am not some trust fund brat. I am marrying a girl who built herself up from nothing." They ate it up. "Leah, you are literally the best investment I ever made." The audio cut. The screen went black for 5 seconds. No one breathed. 200 pairs of eyes shifted from the blank screen to Dylan, who looked like he was shrinking inside his tuxedo. I stepped out from the shadows near the wall. My heels clicked rhythmically on the marble floor as I walked to the center of the room. I did not need a microphone. The silence was my amplifier. "If tonight you have heard Dylan's version of who I am," I said, my voice low and steady, "perhaps it is time you heard a few truths." I reached into my black clutch and pulled out the thick envelope Mason had given me. I walked over to the table where Veronica and Dylan were standing and dropped it with a heavy thud. "That envelope contains certified copies of the original seed investment agreement from Mercer and Hale Capital," I said, addressing the room. "It turns out the angel investor who saved this firm 20 years ago was the Lanton Foundation, my father's foundation." I heard a gasp from the back of the room, and under the terms of that agreement, I continued, The foundation retains the right to call for a leadership review in the case of gross ethical misconduct, given that Dillon just admitted to fraud, manipulation, and elder abuse on tape. I would say the misconduct is undeniable. Dillon's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Aaliyah, wait, you don't understand. I ignored him. I signaled the technician. A new image appeared on the screen. It was a property deed. It showed the ownership structure of the Lakeview Crest estate. At the top of the pyramid was a company called LVC Management. Below that, in fine print, was the parent company Sycamore Trust beneficiary Hillier Phillips. You all seem to be enjoying the venue, I said, looking around at the stunned guests. My fiancé bragged that he used his connections to get this place. He was right. He rented it from me. I turned to Dillon, whose face was now a shade of gray I had never seen before. You are partying on one of the smallest assets in my portfolio. Dillon, I said coldly, I approved your application because I wanted to see how big a hole you would dig if I handed you the shovel, and you did not disappoint. At that moment, the double doors at the side of the hall opened. Mason Calloway walked in, flanked by Arthur Pendleton and George Calloway, the two most senior members of the Mercer and Hale board. They did not look happy. Mr. Mercer, Arthur said, his voice grave, we have reviewed the evidence provided by MS. Phillips and your grandfather. We are convening an emergency board meeting at 8:00 tomorrow morning. Your presence is required, though I suggest you bring legal counsel. And Mason added, stepping forward, we have just received a notarized document from Franklin Mercer transferring his voting proxy to the Sycamore Trust. Effectively, immediately, Hillier Phillips holds the controlling interest in the firm's future. Dillon looked at me. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was a scared little boy who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar. He reached for my hand. Hillier, please, baby, we can talk about this. I was drunk. The boys were just talking trash. You know I love you. You know this is just stress. I looked at his hand, reaching for mine. It looked like a claw. I am not your baby, I said, and you are not drunk. I think you are more sober right now than you have been in your entire life. I raised my left hand. I caught the edge of the engagement ring, the ring Veronica had inspected like a piece of meat, the ring Dillon had bought to mark his territory. I slid it off my finger. I held it up for a second, letting it catch the light, and then I dropped it into his full champagne glass. Clink. The sound was sharp and final. I do not marry men who view me as a marketing prop, I said, and I certainly do not marry men who treat their grandfathers as tax write-ups. The wedding is cancelled. Effective immediately, Veronica found her voice. Then she stepped forward, her face twisted in a snarl of humiliation. You little witch, she hissed. You planned this. You strung him along. You are just leaving him because you found out you have more money than he does. You are exactly what he said you were. You are loyal only to the highest bidder. I smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, full of pity. Veronica, I said softly, if I were a gold digger, I would have chosen a man who actually had gold, not a man who is leveraged to the hilt, living on credit and using his fiancé as credit score to secure his loans. I turned back to the crowd. I am not the one digging for gold here. I am mine, and you two have just lost the map. Franklin cleared his throat. The sound cut through the tension. He wheeled his chair forward, stopping next to me. He looked at his son's wife and his grandson with eyes that were no longer cloudy with age, but burning with disappointment. I confirm everything, MS. Phillips has said, F announced. His voice was strong. My signature was forged on the loans. My medical care was withheld to save money, and my name was used to peddle a lie. He looked at the investors. If you put your money with my grandson, you are not investing in the Mercer legacy. You are investing in a hollow shell. I stand with Aaliyah, and tomorrow morning I will be voting to remove these two from the company I built. The silence broke. Murmurs erupted across the room. People began to back away from Dillon and Veronica as if they were contagious. The investors who had been shaking Dillon's hand 5 minutes ago were now checking their phones, likely emailing their lawyers to pull their commitments. Landon and Chase were already near the exit, abandoning their friend without a backward glance. I looked at Dylan one last time. He was staring at the ring in the champagne glass, his world collapsing in real time. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked ruined. "Goodbye, Dylan," I said. I turned my back on him. I walked through the parting crowd. I did not look down. I did not hurry. I felt the silk of my dress moving against my legs, the cool air of the night waiting for me outside. I walked out the front doors and down the stone steps. The night air was crisp and clean. The lake shimmered in the moonlight, dark and peaceful. A few minutes later, the side door opened. Mr. Reynolds wheeled Franklin out. They came to stop near a stone bench overlooking the water. I walked over and sat on the bench. Franklin sighed, a long, deep sound of release. "Well," Franklin said, looking at the moon, "that was a hell of a party. I think we ruined the carpet with that champagne." I said, "I will buy a new one." Franklin chuckled. "Or rather, you will since you own the place." We sat in silence for a moment. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a profound sense of exhaustion, but also a lightness I hadn't felt in years. "Aaliyah," Franklin said softly, "I owe you an apology for that first day. When I called you a gold digger, I looked at him. He looked younger tonight. The weight of being a victim was gone." "It is okay, Franklin," I said, reaching out and taking his hand. "You didn't know." "I know now," he said. "You weren't digging for money. You were digging for the truth." I smiled. I think I was just digging for my self-respect. I lost it somewhere between the engagement party and the wedding planning. It feels good to have it back. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text from Mason. "Board meeting confirmed for 8 a.m. The SEC has been notified regarding the loan fraud. Dylan's assets are frozen pending investigation. You are free, Aaliyah." I showed the screen to Franklin. "Free," he repeated. "That is a beautiful word. What will you do now?" I asked. "Well," Franklin said, looking back at the house where the party was disintegrating, "I think I'm going to fire my nurse, and then I am going to hire a chef who knows how to make a proper roast chicken, and I have a lot of work to do to fix my company. I might need a partner, someone with capital and a good moral compass." He squeezed my hand. "Know anyone looking for a job?" I laughed. It was a real full laugh that startled a duck sleeping by the water's edge. "I might," I said, "but she is very expensive. She is worth every penny." Franklin said. I looked out at the lake. The water was still and dark, reflecting the stars. I had walked into that house a victim, a prop, a joke. I was walking out as a woman who had rewritten her own story. The wedding was gone. The fiancé was gone. But I had found something much more valuable. I had found the truth, and I had found a friend. "Let's go home, Franklin," I said. "I think we have done enough damage for one night." "Lead the way, boss," he said. We moved toward the car, leaving the wreckage of the Mercer dynasty behind us, ready to build something real. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening while cooking dinner in London, driving to work in New York, or relaxing in a coffee shop in Tokyo? Please leave a comment below and let's share our stories. If you enjoyed seeing Aaliyah take back her power, please make sure to subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that like button so this story can reach even more people who need a reminder that the truth always wins. See you in the next video.